The biggest matchup on the field when the Aggies face the Auburn Tigers is the Texas A&M wide receivers versus the Auburn secondary.
You are Locked On Aggies, your daily podcast on the Texas A&M Aggies. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome on into Locked On Aggies. I'm your host, Andrew Stefaniak. Thanks for making Locked On Aggies your first listen every single day. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. This is a big football game coming up for the Aggies. SEC opener, a lot to prove. You know, you dropped a tough game in week 2. You're coming into this game 2-1. You need to win this football game. You got to win this football game. If you want to have a successful year where you are competing for the West, you got to win this one. And Auburn is, a football team that I think Hugh Freeze is a great coach. I think that he's going to do a good job there, but I don't think they're there yet. I think he got handed a tough situation and had to rebuild that team the best he could. I think they're fine, but I mean, and the problem with Auburn is they've really not really played anybody. They went out to the West Coast and played Cal, who isn't I don't think a great football team by any stretch. So they played two not great opponents, kind of like the Aggies have, aside from Miami's much better than Cal. So I don't think we truly know what this Auburn football team has. I think they're fine. I think if it was in Auburn, I'd be worried about it. With this game being in College Station, I feel much better about the Aggies' chances of winning. But the biggest matchup in this ball game for me, there's a whole bunch. We're going to run through the 6 biggest matchups for this game, but the number one for me is the Texas A&M wide receiver room versus the Auburn secondary. Auburn's secondary is probably their biggest strength on the team, except for maybe their running backs and their running game, and we'll talk about that here in a little bit. They have a really solid secondary. Player named DJ James, who's going to be an NFL draft pick. You got Nehemiah Pritchett, who's been banged up this year. I've heard he's going to be out there, but we don't know that for a fact. A great player there. You got some talented freshmen. You got some good players in the safety room. It's a good Auburn secondary, and it's a deep Auburn secondary. It's probably the deepest and most talented room on that roster. The Texas A&M wide receivers need to get open and create space to make easy throws for Connor Wigman. Who's going to be out there? We know that Noah Thomas is banged up. We know that Evan Stewart didn't play last week, where I'm assuming Evan Stewart's going to be out there against Auburn. Obviously, I haven't really heard much on it, but I assume we'll see Evan Stewart on Saturday dressed out, ready to play. But these receivers are going to have to get open. I think that you're going to want to be able to have a balanced attack against Auburn. You want to have a balanced attack against anybody. But, if there's a team that's good against the run and doesn't have a great secondary, being a team like Texas A&M where you feel confident in your receivers and your quarterback, you can throw the football. But, against a team like Auburn, who their biggest strength on the defense is their secondary, I think you need to do a good job of having balance, running the football, throwing the football. But the receivers are going to have to get open because Auburn has a good secondary, but I don't think it's the best secondary you're going to face this season. So you need to prove that you can get open against these guys. And I'd love to see Wiggs throw for 300 and Evan Stewart have 100 through the air and a touchdown. It would be great. Love to see Noah Thomas out there. I know he's been banged up. He's going through some injuries. I'm hoping he'll be out there. I don't feel as confident about that as I do Evan Stewart being out there. But I want to see a big game from this passing game. Now, you need to have balance. Like I said, you need to have that balance that we talk about all the time. Because then you can kind of key in on it. Oh, okay. Well, we won't rush that many people, and we'll drop everybody back in coverage if you can't run the football. So the Aggies need to be able to run the football, which we'll talk about that coming up next, the running game. But I think the biggest matchup is Texas A&M's wide receivers being able to get open against the talented Tiger secondary. If they're able to do that, I think it's gonna help this Texas A&M team a lot in this big time matchup. So The running backs versus the Texas A&M defense. I mean, the Texas A&M running backs versus the Auburn defensive line secondary. I'm sorry, defensive line front seven is the second biggest matchup in this ball game. Texas A&M, they've run the ball fine. I wouldn't look at it and say it's been great. I thought Reuben Owens looked good last week. He made a couple plays. Le'Veon Moss was back healthy. Mari Daniels has made some plays this year. I think you got a talented room, as we've said for months here on Locked On Aggies. But I think that, like I said, I'm here to reiterate this balance. You have to be able to run the football in this Auburn defensive line in front seven. Not great. Probably bottom tier in the SEC. There's some talented players in that room. Keldrick Falk, true freshman, really good football player. So there's some talented players in the Auburn front seven. They've got this linebacker, Eugene Asante, who's kind of jumped onto the scene. Good player there as well. It's a talented team, talented bunch, but I don't, not deep, not a lot of depth. I think, your starting guys, they got some good players in the starters, but the two deep isn't all that scary, to where I think this offensive line and this running game should just pummel the Auburn defensive line and the Auburn front seven. If they don't do that, I think that's a way that the Auburn Tigers can kind of get you. If you aren't running the football well and you're forced to throw it, and the Auburn secondary is playing well, that is how they're going to get you. And that's definitely concerning to me, because you talk about the Aggies are going to be favored. I've seen it around a touchdown. So the defense travels. So the defense is going to travel for Auburn, and underdogs. The way you win football games is you shorten the game, you stop the run, stuff like that. So I think that we need to see the Texas A&M run game put up some yards. You really need to see it. And then my next biggest matchup is the flip side of this argument: the Auburn running backs versus rushing attack versus the Texas A&M defensive line front seven. Auburn has a really good running back room. Those are the two rooms on this team, the running back room and the secondary, that I look at and I say, okay, those are talented groups. They don't have good receivers. They don't really have, all that great linebackers, all that great defensive line. Their offensive line's fine. It's nothing scary. That's where they win, is they have a talented secondary and a talented running back room. Like I said, the way that the Auburn Tigers are going to create an upset is shorten this football game. The way they want to do that, run the football, run the rock, run it well. So the Auburn Tigers are going to look to do that. They're going to try and run the ball at a high level, and you need to be able to stop them. We've talked about all year long, the biggest key to this football team is, can you stop the run? I have been, I know I've knocked this defense a whole bunch. You got to give them credit where credit's due. I think they've done a good job stopping the run for the, they have. They've done a good job stopping the run. Which was a concern. Now, obviously, the passing has been more, the secondary has been the bigger concern thus far than the rushing, than the stopping the run. But at the end of the day, shout out to the defense. They've done a good job stopping the run, which was a concern for me. So I feel good about it. But they've got some talented backs there in Auburn. You got Jarquez Hunter, you got Damari Alston, you got Jeremiah Cobb, the true freshman, and then the transfer Brian Battie, who's also a good kick returner. You got a talented room over there. And that is where they're going to try and win this game. They're going to try and pound the rock. The defensive line has to stop this. They can't let it happen. I don't think Auburn's going to beat you through the air. Their wide receivers are bad. Their passing attack is not good. It's fine. They were great last week against Samford. That's not all that intimidating. When you look at the numbers for Auburn last week, I think against Cal, the one Power 5 opponent they've played, I'm pretty sure that they threw for like less than 100 yards. Let me pull up that number to make sure I'm 100% right about that. It was a 14-10 win over Cal. Their defense looked great, but yeah, their starting quarterback Payton Thorne had 94 passing yards in that game. So they threw for 94 yards against the only Power 5 opponent they've played. So I definitely look at that and I say to myself, you can stop this passing attack. You need to stop the run. If you can stop the run, if you can stop the run and they beat you through the air, you tip your cap, because what they want to do is run the football. If you stop them from running the football, you've done your job. That's what we need to see against the Auburn Tigers on Saturday. If you are able to stop their rushing attack, I think the Aggies have a good shot in this football game. But like I said, the three things, to reiterate them, receivers have to get open. Auburn has a good secondary. Receivers have got to get open. Our rushing attack needs to be dominant against the Auburn front seven, and then vice versa. Our front seven needs to stop the Auburn rushing attack. That is going to be a big, the trenches is going to be a big battle in this football game. They're going to try and run the football. You need to stop them. We need to run the football to have the balance that I've talked about. You have to have that balance. If you want to win this game, you have to have good balance, be able to beat them through the air, beat them through the ground. If you do that, it becomes a lot harder for a defensive coordinator, becomes a lot harder to call plays, read the offense. So you have to be able to do both. And if you do that in this football game, I think the Aggies have a good shot. We're going to talk about a few more interesting matchups, including something I saw from Auburn starting quarterback Payton Thorne last Saturday that the Aggies need to do a good job taking care of, or this could be a tight football game. We'll talk about that coming up right here on Locked On Aggies. But first, I want to tell you about our friends over at FanDuel. Snap into action this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is so easy to use, and there's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. So some other matchups that are going to be crucial in this football game is, and this is something I picked up on watching the game. Auburn starting quarterback Payton Thorne, I didn't think he was much of a speed demon. And I don't really think he is a speed demon. But he was quick enough to run for over a $120 last week against Samford. And he looked pretty good doing it. They run a bit of a 2-quarterback system in Auburn. I kind of think you might see that vanish. I don't know how much you'll see of Robby Ashford on Saturday for Auburn against the Aggies. I think that they're kind of starting to go away from it. I listened to some press conferences and Coach Freeze was talking about that. But I don't I look at this and I say to myself, you need to do a good job of keeping contain on the quarterback, whoever it is. If it's Payton Thorne, if it's Robby Ashford, you have got to keep them in the pocket. Now, Payton Thorne was great the other day through the air and on the ground. He had a good day. He made a couple mistakes. One was on him. One was kind of a ball hit the receiver on the shoulder. So you need to do a good job containing him or Ashford, whoever's in there. You got to know this. Robby Ashford, heading into this week, this is interesting. He did have a couple passes. The first 2 games where he did have a handful of throws, he didn't complete a single pass past the line of scrimmage. He finally had a couple big plays through the air when he came in to relieve Payton Thorne against Samford. But Robby Ashford's not a great passer. He can pass, but he's not a great passer. When he's in the football game, I think he's going to be running the football, especially in the red zone. Now, they could try and do some jump pass stuff or some, roll him out like he's going to run in the throw. They could do a gimmicky thing like that. But if he's in there, he's running the football. I think you need to know that. And Coach Fisher and company they're going to be, Coach Durkin, they're going to be preparing for that this week. They know that. When Ashford's coming in the game, he's going to be looking to run the football. But Payton Thorne can run it too. And that's what I'm talking about. Payton Thorne runs the football better than I kind of imagined. Like I said, I've been watching a lot of tape getting ready for this game this week for the Aggies, and I was looking at it and I was like, that guy, he got. My dad made this comparison this morning, and it was a good one. But he said it's kind of that Stetson Bennett. Now Stetson Bennett's quicker than Payton Thorne, but it's that deceivingly fast. You look at it and you're like, man, I don't, and then he kind of gets moving. You're like, oh, okay, that guy can move a little bit. That is kind of what Payton Thorne looked like to me on tape. So, the Aggies have got to contain him. They got to keep him in the pocket, make him throw the football because, and it's not really Payton Thorne's fault. I think he's a fine quarterback. I don't think he's great. I think he's fine. The problem for him is I don't think he has really that many good receivers, which, as a quarterback, it's not easy to succeed when you don't have a great wide receiver room. So I look at this And I think that's going to be the key. I think you have to keep him in the pocket, make him throw the football, because I think he can throw the football well, but I don't know if people are going to be open for him to throw the football too. Now, the next matchup I'm looking for is Connor Wigman versus the Auburn Tigers secondary. Auburn has done a good job creating turnovers so far this year. They do have, I think is it how many interceptions? Is it 5, 3, 4? They have 5 interceptions on the season. So, they're picking the ball off. Connor Wigman has done a good job. He made a mistake against it, one that wasn't on him. He's done a good job, taking care of the ball through 3 starts. That needs to continue against Auburn. That is how Auburn can beat you, is if you turn the football over. You've got to take care of the football. Don't turn it over. No fumbles, no interceptions, no muffed punts, nothing like that. You have got to take care of the football. If you take care of the football, like I said, I think that the Aggies are in a good position to win this football game. But Connor Wigman has to do a good job reading this secondary. One of the Auburn safeties, Jalen Simpson, has 3 interceptions so far this season, 1 a game. You got to make sure you aren't letting him read your eyes and go pick off the football. It's kind of what we talked about against Miami. Miami had talented safeties. Auburn does as well. I think they have great safeties. You have to read those eyes, see where they are, find your receiver, get it to him clean, make smart throws, make sure there's nobody hiding from you, get the football to your playmakers, and do it safely. If Connor Wigman's able to do that, I think the Aggies win this one. But like I said, that is how you create upsets, turnovers. And which, if you do end up being a 7-point favorite, you'd call that an upset. So you have got to take care of the football. You need to do a good job keeping it out of the opposing team's hands. I think that I don't think this is going to be a super high scoring game on the Auburn side of things. I think it's a Texas A&M offense. The offense is the best part of the Texas A&M football team, and I think the defense is the best part of Auburn's team. So, it's going to be a bad offense in Auburn versus a not great defense in Texas A&M, and a good offense in A&M versus a good defense in Auburn, to where I don't think it's going to be a crazy high-scoring game. I still think, A&M puts up 28 points. I think they win this one something like 28-21 or 28-17, something like that, which I am predicting the Aggies to win this one. But you have to take care of the football. If you don't take care of the football, that is how you're going to get yourself in trouble. So that's up to Connor Wigman. Read the safeties, find open receivers, don't make mistakes. And if you do that, I think the Aggies are going to take care of business. And then the defensive backs versus the wide receivers. You had some good – Jacoby and Deuce came in and played some good football. Obviously, you were without Tariq, Jordan, and Tony Grimes on last Saturday. So this is an interesting secondary. It'll be really interesting to see who's out there against the Auburn Tigers on Saturday. Because, I feel a lot more confident in Jacoby. We got a comment on yesterday's show talking about how he's just a better tackler than Jordan. And everything I've seen, he seems, he's got that dog mentality. He's not afraid. And so I agree with you on that. I want to see this secondary dominate against these Auburn wide receivers. They are not good. I think, Miami's wide receivers are leaps and bounds better than the Auburn wide receivers. You have to cover these guys well. And I think Van Dyke is better than Payton, Thorne, and Robby Ashford. So, you have to do a good job staying on these receivers. That's how they're going to beat you. If they're able to get vertical on you, get some deep passes. They've got a couple receivers, Javarius Johnson, Malcolm Johnson Jr., who are quicker guys and can get down the field. So you got to do a good job keeping contained on some of their quick receivers. They got this little guy, Jay Fair, who's quick as well. And then they got some big wideouts as well. A guy named Shane Hooks, Nick Mardner, who hasn't played. I don't know if he's going to play. It'll be interesting to see that. And then Jair Shorter's a big old so they've got some talented receivers, the Auburn Tigers do. But I wouldn't go as far to say talented. They've got a deep room of guys who can play. I wouldn't call them talented. I think they've definitely underperformed. Zach Blackerby was telling me, the Locked On Auburn host who we'll have on Thursday's episode of Locked On Aggies, he told me that the wide receiver has been a big letdown for this football team. So I think we need to have a breakout game from the Texas A&M secondary. You need to lock down this Auburn pass game. If you can do that, I'll feel a lot better about, games like the Alabama game where we've seen, not a lot of great stuff out of the quarterbacks there. And So I feel better if you're able to shut about the season, if you're able to shut down this Auburn passing attack. So I want to see that. I want to see the Texas A&M DBs lock down the Auburn wide receivers. And then the last one I have here is the Texas A&M offensive line needs to hammer the Auburn defensive line. Auburn's defensive line is definitely not a strength of the team. Like I said, they've got some players that are fine. It's an SEC football team, y'all. I mean, we're not playing Louisiana Monroe anymore. It's an SEC football team. These are fine football players, but I think the offensive line is more talented than their defensive line, and you have got to get a push because I talked about you need to run the ball well against Auburn to have that balance that's going to help you win the football game. If you have the balance, it's going to create more openings in the passing game. I want to see a balanced attack in this game, and the way that you're going to be able to do that is your offensive line gets a push and you run the football well. So that's the last thing that I really want to see is the Texas A&M the Texas A&M offensive line. I want to see them get a good push against the Auburn defensive line. I think that is a way that you're able to really win this game. Balance is going to be key. You have to have the balance. We're going to talk about what the Aggies have to do to win this game and some interesting numbers on Connor Wigman coming up right here on Locked On Aggies. But first, I want to tell you about our friends over at Game Time. Game Time is the best place to go get your last-minute tickets. They beat every other competitor. I always say Game Time, and the best part about it, you can get concert tickets. You can get tickets to comedy. You can get tickets to a ball game. They have every kind of ticket you would ever need at the best prices last minute. One thing I like to do is, I get every sports ticket I get, I always get on Game Time because they have the best prices. And that's what I did. I compared Game Time's prices to some other competitors about half an hour to the game. No one can compete with Game Time. Game Time is the best place to get your last minute tickets. Stuff ain't cheap right now, especially going to ball games and concerts. Game Time is the best place to help you out, save you some money. It's just an all-around great service that I use myself, and I highly recommend y'all starting to use as well. Snag the tickets without the stress with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last-minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. So, how do the Aggies win this football game? I mean, we talked about the matchups that are important and what Texas A&M needs to do. But I think the way that Texas A&M wins this football game is just going and putting up a lot of points. I don't know how much Auburn's going to be able to score. I think it's their first real road test. It was funny. I looked because I was like, well, they played Cal and Cal. Now that's different. You go into Cal because it's across the country. But I looked at the environment and I thought to myself, well, heck, there's more Auburn fans here than there were Cal fans. So this is their first true road test. And playing in Kyle Field, good luck with that. This is me, Payton Thorne's welcome to the SEC. I don't know. I mean, I'm sure he's played SEC teams when he was at Michigan State before Auburn. I'm sure he's played SEC teams there. But, I mean, have fun playing against the Aggies in Kyle Field. Good luck with that. So I think the way that the Aggies win this football game is you just flat out dominate in the trenches. You get open on their talented secondary. You don't let their, not great receivers get open. And Connor Wigman just pick the defense apart. You got to run the football well. Like I said, that balance is going to be key. You have to have the balance that we discussed. I mean, it's key. Teams can dial in on what you're doing if you don't have balance. And I think this Texas A&M football team wants to have balance. They want to run the football well. I think they have the offensive line and the running backs needed to do it. So I want to see this team run the football well. I want to see these receivers getting open. And I think if you do that, I think the Aggies are in a prime position to win this football game if they're able to do that. I think if you're going to lose this football game, the flip side of that, what you have to do to lose is turn the football over. If you give Auburn a short field, I think it's going to be tough for Auburn to drive the football. I'm not sold on that offense. I don't know how they're going to drive the football. I think if you give them, if you do what Miami did to start the game against A&M, where they gave them two quick, first goal to go opportunities, yeah, I think Auburn's going to be able to score points in situations like that. If you give them 1st and 10 from the Texas A&M 21, they're at least going to get 3. You can't turn the football over. You have to be smart with the football. If you're smart with the football, I think you win. If you're not and you turn it over, I think the Auburn Tigers are a good enough football team with a good enough coaching staff to come in and win this football game. So you need to do a good job being smart with the football. No fumbles, no interceptions, no muffed punts, no silly mistakes like that. Don't shoot yourself in the foot. If you don't shoot yourself in the foot, I think you start SEC play 1-0 with a big win over the SEC West foe for one more year, Auburn Tigers. That is going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Aggies. Thank you all so much for tuning in every single day. Really appreciate it. I can't express to you how much I appreciate it. On Thursday, we will have host of Locked On Auburn, Zach Blackerby, on the show to discuss the matchup. It's going to be a fun crossover where we get to break down this ball game. Can't wait to hear about this game from the Auburn perspective. Going to be a lot of fun, so stay tuned for that on Thursday. Have a great rest of your day, and we will see you tomorrow.